The second season of One Piece live action has just aired and is yet another success, but this is not really what should have happened. By all logic, the second season should have been a complete failure. This may be a bit hard to believe, but the team who made the first season had gone through a complete overhaul for season 2. Around half of the credited writers who'd worked on the first season did not actually return for the second one, but much more importantly, this included one of the first season's showrunners, Steven Maeda, who stepped down from the role and only served as a consultant and producer on season 2. This is pretty damn huge. In case you are unaware, a showrunner on a television production is essentially what a director is on a movie, where they are in a very real sense the boss in charge of the entire show. While writers changing from season to season isn't that unusual, the literal showrunners changing is, and many shows are often believed to have fallen exactly because of this happening. Netflix's One Piece was not, however, even a normal show to begin with, as it is pretty much to date the only truly successful anime to live action adaptation we've ever seen. What this all means is that not only was the show tasked with capturing lightning in a bottle twice, but they also had to do it without many of the people who'd been there to catch it in the first place. Yet somehow, they did it again. Personally, season 2 barely even feels like a new season, as the show pretty much continues exactly where the first season's finale left off, as if there hadn't even been a 2.5-year gap between the two episodes. If I didn't know better, I don't think I would have even realized that the team behind the show had changed so radically, and I'd guess this is actually the case for most viewers. So, really, what I wanted to highlight in the intro of this video is the huge invisible struggle Matt Owens and his team faced while making this season, but somehow still ending up with a product that basically looks effortless. Oh yeah, they also pretty much fixed Zoro's character in this new season. Back when the first season aired, I and a lot of people thought it really struggled with bringing the Roronoa Zoro we knew from the manga to life. While still a warrior, live-action Zoro was still far more cold and humorless than the original. Not so with season 2, however. Season 2 Zoro is actually funny as heck.
When the rotor is fixed, I'll use this to poke that big punching bag looking thing on the roof of his mouth.
The uvula?
So it's a girl whale.
He's not just funny though, but paradoxically, this is also the most brutal version of Zoro we've ever seen in the franchise's history. In the famous scene where the Straw Hats enter their first island on the Grand Line, and Zoro ends up fighting 100 bounty hunters, in the show, Zoro doesn't just knock these people out, but literally murders them. Whenever Zoro fights random goons in the manga, he doesn't actually usually go for the kill, but has actually gone on record saying that he uses the back of his blade to knock weak opponents out. This isn't because Zoro is against killing, but just like in the show, he has been confirmed to have killed Mr. 7. The real reason why Zoro has no confirmed on-page kills in the manga is that One Piece is just very squeamish about death, where not only are confirmed kills very rare, but random bystanders are very regularly shown surviving what look to be fatal wounds. Death in the live-action version is however handled very differently. In the first season alone, characters who are literally still to this day alive in the manga are now 6 feet under in the Netflix universe, and this is seemingly continued in the second season. Zoro's rampage through Whiskey Peak in the live action is however another level, and is something the manga would never ever show, where the story is incredibly protective of the Straw Hats never getting these kinds of on-page kills. Here though, Zoro is literally shown cutting people's throats, and the episode even ends with Miss Valentine confirming that the people he cut are all dead. I think it makes all the sense in the world for the live action to make this change, as sword fighting without this kind of carnage would honestly be way less visually appealing on screen. So yeah, Zoro now has his very own Kill Bill moment in the franchise. Since Netflix is seemingly set on this direction with his character, I really wouldn't advise whoever they cast as Mr. 1 to think that they'll be coming back after season 3. I don't really think this deviation honestly changes Zoro's character in any way though, even if we never saw it. We still know that Zoro is a killer in the original story, and he clearly tries to kill many of his opponents throughout the manga. The people Zoro killed in the show were also clearly not good guys, but basically just terrorists hired by Crocodile to do evil things for money. So Zoro killing them doesn't exactly make him less likable in my eyes. What I do think may have been a genuine deviation from the original character though, was Robin possibly killing Commander Ripper in the season's opening scene. Robin is another character with no confirmed kills in the manga, and even though she says that she used to work in assassination, we know none of the details or who she might have assassinated. We do however know that Commander Ripper, in both the show and the manga, is not a bad person, and the first season made it clear that Captain Morgan was really the only truly evil marine on this island, with the rest just being forced to follow his orders. Still, I can only say that Robin possibly killed this dude, as just like in the manga, getting shot in One Piece very often does not actually mean that you die. If he is actually dead though, I personally really do not like this deviation, as the original Robin is someone I would consider to be very much a good person, where even when under Baroque works, she is regularly sabotaging the organization from within, and since this is the direction they're also clearly going with her on the show, I can only guess we'll randomly see Commander Reaper still being alive later on, but I really don't know one way or another. Even though I think Zoro was the Straw Hat most improved from the first season, I also think he pretty much was the only Straw Hat that even had to be improved. If you ask me, the rest of the crew, while somewhat different from the original story, was more than fine in the first season, and the show pretty much just kept on doing what they had already been doing with them in the second season. This was already arguably the case before, but Sanji to me continues to be the Straw Hat whose live-action version is the most different compared to the manga, by a huge margin. Live-action Sanji is just way more innocent than the original. In the manga, Sanji is very much a man of extremes, where he is absurdly lustful with women and incredibly cantankerous with men. On the show, however, Season 2 Sanji doubles down on Sanji's more sensitive and gentlemanly side, where even though this side of Sanji is still there in the manga, it is essentially the core of his character on the show. For example, when it comes to his relationship with the opposite sex, instead of Sanji being a raving horn dog, Sanji on the show is just really needy and desperate for female attention. When it comes to his interactions with other males though, even though Sanji is still competitive like in the manga, he is also way more chill and nowhere near as aggressive. I think this is really well shown in his relationship with Luffy, where Sanji in the manga regularly gets pissed off over Luffy's stupidity, but in the live action, he mostly just laughs all of it off. I think it's possible the actor was a big influence in many of these writing decisions, where at least from seeing a couple of his YouTube videos, the man really comes across as a total goofball.
I'm in Dubai. Oh, I crashed a buggy.
Honestly though, I've always thought this kind of Sanji is him at his best. I really wish the story more often used this more cool and human Whole Cake Island version of Sanji, so I definitely like the direction Netflix is taking with the character. Speaking of Whole Cake Island, this season even flirted with Sanji's extended backstory as early as Drum Island. I remember watching an interview some years ago, where Matt Owens said something like Sanji being one of his favorite One Piece characters, so I guess he really couldn't help himself, and wanted to include this bit before he too left the team. Granted, this wasn't just Sanji, but the entire second season is filled with references to details we've only learned in the last few manga arcs, such as Sun God Nika or the God Valley incident, and the show even has characters like Sabo and Bartolomeo appear way before they ever did in the manga. My only guess is that the writers are trying to mimic the manga's writing style by setting up these plot developments well in advance, which to throw some shade in the manga's direction, I very much appreciate with Nika being mentioned way earlier than in the original story. In case you haven't noticed, this video is basically just me stream of conscience pointing out things that caught my eye from having just watched the second season. This next topic is probably not something I should even touch upon to be honest, but I feel like I'm almost obliged to bring up what I think is an overlooked angle in this whole discussion. Basically, a lot of characters from the manga have actually had their skin tones changed in the second season. This was already something One Piece live action did in the first season, but in the second season, it's now happening to more and more main characters. This was also something noted by a lot of articles and fan discussions leading up to the second season's release, and I've also noticed it being talked about even more now that the season is out. Just to make this clear, I personally really don't care for the characters' different pigments one way or another. The only reason why I'm bringing this up is because I may have figured out why this keeps happening so much in the live action, and I actually don't think it has anything to do with any political agenda, but instead has everything to do with the business that goes into making a television show. In case you didn't know, Netflix's One Piece is primarily produced in the country of South Africa. Because of this, for purely monetary and logistical reasons, it makes a lot of sense for Netflix to hire people who work on the show directly from this country. This is also nothing exclusive to One Piece. Game of Thrones, for example, had this exact same phenomenon, where the show was primarily produced in Northern Ireland, which led to it having a disproportionate number of Irish cast members. Not because the story was particularly Irish, but because it is just way easier and cheaper to hire local talent. South Africa is however a step beyond this, where apparently the government there literally provides financial benefits if a television production hires local actors. Looking into this a bit further, I think it's incredibly likely that this is what is behind many of Netflix's casting decisions for One Piece. Both the first and second season are absolutely filled to the brim with actors from South Africa, to a far bigger degree than most of you probably think. Everyone from Mihawk to Brook to even Dorian Broggie are actually actors from this country, just to name a few. The casting is so extensively South African that I'm almost surprised I didn't see Dricus du Plessis playing a role, especially with how many crying scenes there were in Season 2. Anyway, this is the only reason why I wanted to bring up this whole topic, as I think a lot of people may have missed this interesting factoid about the casting. They still didn't go for every character with a new look on the show, where VB's actor is for example British, but for most of the characters, there probably was no greater reason than money and logistics, and you should probably expect to keep seeing more and more South African actors in the show's future. When watching the new season for a second time with my buddy, he made a point I wanted to bring up, where he thinks an extremely heterogeneous country like South Africa is actually a pretty good fit for a colorful world like One Piece. And since South Africa is a place so rarely seen on television, this could make the show appear more like another world to most audiences. When I first heard that the second season was only going to adapt up to the Drum Island arc, one thing that I was left really wondering about was how they were going to pull off an ending that was going to draw viewers back in for the third season. I genuinely cannot be the only one who was kind of expecting something crazier than what we got. For example, Season 1 ended with back-to-back huge moments of the Straw Hats defeating Arlong, Luffy facing off against Garp, Nami's recruitment, and Luffy becoming the most wanted man in the East Blue, on top of a final tease about Smoker's character. This time, however, the season essentially ends off on Chopper's recruitment, the crew heading for Alabasta, a tease about the Will of D, and finally a full introduction to Crocodile, and the fact that Baroque Works is being led by a warlord of the sea. It's not a bad ending, but to me definitely doesn't hit as hard as the first season, and if YouTube has taught me anything, it's how important these kinds of hooks are for keeping the viewership engaged with your story. So I'm really left wondering why Netflix decided to pull its punches here with the season finale. What I find really odd is that there seemingly were so many things Netflix could have done to spice up this ending. In the manga, Drum Island is actually the place where we get our first glimpse at both Ace and Blackbeard, and the show literally teased both characters in the earlier episodes. I really think the option to integrate either of them at the end of the season, like they did with Smoker in the first one, must have at least been on the table. Granted, I guess it would have taken away from Crocodile's introduction if there was another, even more mysterious character presented after him before the credits, so I guess it makes sense why Netflix decided to focus on him. For anyone who hasn't seen it, I definitely recommend looking up interviews done by the actor they picked for Crocodile. Even though he only appeared in a couple scenes in this season, the actor is clearly insanely invested in the character, and if his performance here is anything to go by, he should genuinely be one of the guaranteed highlights of Season 3. I suppose the way they're doing Season 3 is also part of the reason why they didn't put so much stock into Season 2's cliffhangers, as production on the third season already began months ago, so the wait this time should be way less than what it took between the first and second season. I originally wrote a whole segment here about the possible future problem One Piece live action might have to tackle with the Straw Hats actors, especially Luffy, growing too old for their roles. But after thinking about it some more, I really think I overestimated this problem. Basically, I now think that virtually all the Straw Hat actors should be perfectly fine to still play these roles for even the next 10 years, if Netflix wants to keep making the show. All of them are already in their 20s, and as long as all of them maintain a healthy lifestyle, I think this is what they should still sound and look like for years to come. This should even go for Inaki, where even though Luffy is a really youthful character, if Inaki in his early 20s is still able to pull off what he did in Season 2, I think he really just needs to make sure his voice doesn't drop too much, and to basically keep using sunscreen every day. By the way, on the topic of actors aging, did anyone else notice that Crocus still looked super old in the flashback scene they showed in the live action? Crocus in this scene should literally be younger than Inaki is in real life, yet he looks old as heck. So, if this is really the best de-aging CGI Netflix can do at this point, the actors might want to upgrade from sunscreen to just using NMNs or something. Anyway, now it genuinely looks like the show is pretty much in the clear for the future, where I think Netflix has pretty much slain all the dragons. Season 1 already did most of the heavy lifting, by somehow successfully making a vibe for this adaptation that matches the manga, while still being its own thing. And now Season 2 basically proves that this wasn't just a fluke, and that the show still has legs even with different writers, showrunners, and a somewhat older main cast. Plus, they overcame a massive hurdle by actually making Chopper work through CGI, which is massive, since he's a character who should pretty much be appearing in every single future episode of the show. As someone who knows absolutely nothing about what's going on behind the scenes, I think that none of the show's future seasons should be nowhere near as challenging to make as the first two seasons were, and the show probably has the potential to go all the way to the post-time skip if they want. I still have a few more observations left. One is that I really appreciate how this season found organic ways to bring back characters like Garp, Roger and Mihawk from the first season without it feeling out of place. Even though these characters are nowhere to be seen during these arcs in the manga, one big character who didn't come back though is Shanks, which I think was a smart move, where Shanks above almost any other character in the story basically lifts off the mystery around him, and I appreciate the restraint Netflix had in benching him for an entire season, especially since Shanks has an upcoming canonical scene right after the Alabasta arc. Another random point is that there is absolutely no way I believe that any version of Sanji that exists in any universe of the story became a chef that he is without Chef's help. And my last point for this video is that I just really like a lot of the shirts that the characters wore this season. I personally wouldn't mind wearing Luffy's little garden one in my private life. I am finally back to my country and can really hopefully get back to making One Piece videos on this channel, especially long overdue manga videos. I'm really sorry for being away so many weeks, especially to my members, and I really appreciate those of you who for whatever reason decided to stay on the channel. Big thanks to everyone for watching this video to the end.